So hello all. Today we have a very special guest with us, Chief Economic Advisor to the Government of India, Dr. V. Anantha Nageswaran. It is our very privilege to welcome to the show Dr. V. Anantha Nageswaran. So welcome to the show.
Thank you.
I am Dr. Nitin Thomas, Head of the Department of Economics, Bharat Mata College Autonomous. And I am joined by my co-host, Dr. Veena Jayakumar. She is also Assistant Professor in Economics from the Department of Economics. Anantha Nageswaran sir, a question about you had a very good career spanning in the industry, finance and academia. So why do you choose, what pursued you to choose economics as a profession?
Yeah.
And how did your journey shaped to think like an economist?
No, I think these are very useful and important questions, but I wish I really had a tailor-made or a template answer, because many times we assume that the choices we make are ours, but sometimes the choices are made for us. And as long as you are comfortable with those choices and you feel your strength and comfort are okay with those choices, then you go along in that path. So I always tell my students and my own children what my first colleague in Union Bank of Switzerland in Zurich told me in '94 when I had just joined him after finishing my PhD in the US. And he said, Anant, life is but a series of accidents. I agree with him, in the sense that we like to believe, and you people are looking at my CV now in retrospect.
Yes.
Oh, it looks very beautiful, as if everything was nicely structured. Bachelor's degree, MBA immediately, 5 years in public sector, PhD, international experience, come back to India, doing public policy. I agree. And that is the important point to remember, that is actually divine will. Non-believers can call it luck or chance. I would like to call it divine will. So without that, I don't think this would have happened. I've always been interested in big picture questions, that's for sure. And for that, I owe my thanks to my father, who used to be talking about these big picture issues when I was growing up. And naturally, in the early years, you take your cues from your parents.
Yes.
And that's how it happened.
Okay.
But after that, I think, I don't know, as you said, maybe this could be, as the Indian philosophy says, it could be in your vasanas, it could be in your past life or whatever. So I got automatically drawn to the bigger questions. Somehow, being part of a corporate setup or academia somehow didn't interest me. I always thought your education is useful only if it is applied in the service of solving problems, public problems. And that is why post-PhD, I didn't choose to stay in academia. I continued with my corporate career. So I think the broad thing I can say is I had interest in big picture issues, public policy. And I never considered myself an economist, by the way. Okay. I did my bachelor's degree in commerce.
Okay.
And I did my management degree. I didn't do a BA economics or a master's in economics or anything like that. And in fact, my PhD was in School of Management, not in the School of Economics, okay, at UMass Amherst. And my professor was an economist, and he did his PhD under Professor Hal Varian, okay, of University of Michigan, Ann Arbor. Yeah. And he himself thought that the topic of exchange rate that I chose for my doctoral thesis was a nice hybrid. It straddled both finance and economics. Yes. So if you want, I would like to call myself a financial economist. Okay. So it is, I suppose, a lot of things are chosen for us. You just have a very broad idea of where you want to go. The rest is up to divinity.
Okay, very good. So you always mention about the applicability of the knowledge. That is very great, sir. So since you see is in the hot seat, so everybody will be expecting me to ask a very economic question that is coming in the minds of people now, okay, nowadays, because of the recent global turmoil in the economic area in the West Asia. So how it is going to impact Indian economy, and how resilient are we in managing these shocks?
Well, it's going to impact India significantly, and in many ways, through the price of oil and gas, through supply disruptions, through both import and export, through foreign trade in general, therefore, through the higher cost for logistics, freight, and also insurance cost, and of course, through the impact on remittances, which has been a fairly big sum in recent years, more than $120, $130 billion. Some of it may come down. So in that sense, the channels of impact are more than one, as far as the Indian economy is concerned, for next financial year. Are we resilient? Undoubtedly, because I think post-COVID, we have done a far better job than many other countries in terms of managing our growth, bringing down our fiscal deficit, and also keeping inflation in check, and invested in productive capacity of the economy. Sure, there will be impact on growth, and there is a trade-off between inflation and fiscal deficit that will arise in the course of next year. And also we have to watch what happens to the current account balance in the process. While it is currently very low, we have to see how far it widens rather. And because even though historically we had faced current account deficits of 4%, 5%, etc., even a number that is between 2 and 3% could turn out to be a higher number in the current context, because capital flows will also be very cautious.
Yes.
Movement of capital across borders will probably also be restricted.
Okay.
Most investors may want to withdraw into their shell and just play safe for the time being. So what is the sustainable level of current account deficit is always a function of how much the market is willing to finance you.
Okay.
So given that there is no absolute number and say beyond that current account is safe, below that current account is safe, and beyond that it is unsafe, there is nothing like that. It's a question of market's willingness and comfort to finance it. So therefore we have to watch that also. But we are resilient. We don't have major imbalances right now going into the current situation. Whether it is external account, whether it is internal domestic account, bank credit growth, banking financial system health, all those things check all the right boxes. So we will be maybe bruised and dented, but not felled. Okay. So, and we will be able to hopefully resume the growth rate back to 7% plus after 1 year. However, of course, there is also a potential silver lining, which of course doesn't look very evident right now. Should the conflict end reasonably quickly, and should the Strait of Hormuz be open for traffic without any risks at all, and if that happens in the next 2 weeks before the financial year begins, then I think it will be just a minor impact in the first quarter, and hopefully we can sail through the rest of the year. So it is possible that the impact is slight. It is possible that the impact is quite significant, and in multiple areas. Hopefully we are lucky enough to have only the lighter impact. But if it is a larger impact, I think we are resilient enough to absorb the shock and resume our vigorous growth process shortly thereafter.
Okay. Sir, India is undergoing a lot of reforms. I know that the government has recently mentioned that 1600 plus reforms has happened in these years. So most of the reforms are coming from your office. We all know that.
No, not necessarily. I mean, the reforms are done by the ministries. The Honorable Prime Minister's vision. Yeah. So, I mean, we only play the role of, providing the information, doing the homework, giving them the analysis, and so on.
So what is that process of suggesting or finding out which area to reform? And is it, I think that in India, reform is very difficult task to achieve.
No, one of the things we can kind of justifiably feel proud of having had some role or participation, it's in the area of state-level deregulation. Okay. And we have also tried to move the needle on the discussion on energy security versus energy transition, etc. And I think also when it comes to the question of mental health of our youth cohort, these are the issues which we have consistently highlighted. Okay. And but in all these cases, the job of an advisor is only to advise. Ultimately, the political executive and the administrative executive, which is the bureaucracy, they have to basically be convinced of the merits of what we are saying, and depending on the context, political economy, other trade-offs, etc., they take the call, and therefore they should get the credit.
Hello, myself Dr. Veena Jaykumar. So continuing with the questions.
Thank you.
So given that the policy strategies, as you mentioned, like one policy which fits for one country doesn't fit for another. So what do you think? Is there any specific policy that can be fit in all cases without compromising our economic growth?
No. I mean, we can always say that in general, giving economic bandwidth back to micro and small enterprises through deregulation, so that they can apply their limited bandwidth to running the business, to growing the business, to hiring the right people. That works in all contexts. It is ultimately a government having a regulatory mechanism which is both appropriate and light touch, especially for micro, small, and medium enterprises. That probably you can say it is a context-free statement one can make. You see, and also with respect to education and skilling, being able to focus on outcomes rather than inputs and processes. That is a statement one can make more generally. You see, but today in the world of where we are when it comes to, where I think it's the context that matters is particularly in deciding between where the markets will play a role, where the state has to lend its guiding hand, is today in the area of industrial policy and manufacturing. The words industrial policy became unfashionable from the 80s onwards as globalization picked up. And President Reagan and Prime Minister Thatcher were in the sort of the driving seat or in the vanguard of pushing this idea that markets will determine everything, whether it is trade or finance or domestic production, etc. And let's produce it at the most efficient place, which means outsource everything. You focus on what is your core competence, which is finance and services, which is what the advanced Anglo-Saxon economies did. But now, 40 years later, they are realizing the folly of it. That is, you have to make stuff, you have to manufacture. So I think that is a statement where you can say context matters. So in the 80s, in the context of global peace, globalization and technology, and therefore efficient production and just-in-time inventory, all those concepts worked. But now it is all about security. So in that sense, some statements can be considered eternal truths or universal truths in economics, but very few of them qualify for that.
Okay, but the hard reality is that our industrial growth is not up to the mark. So how can we make it an entrepreneurial country, or how can we come forward, sir?
No, I mean, point is well taken. Yes, we have basically in the past, we used to suffer from infrastructure deficiency, and that has been very substantially addressed. And although that doesn't mean that we don't have more work to do, because we are still a low middle income country, and therefore infrastructure has to keep up with the rise in incomes. So it is not as if the work on infrastructure is done, but at the same time it's important for us to acknowledge that much has been done as well in the last 11 years. And what would it take, therefore, to make our country a manufacturing powerhouse is exactly what the government has been pursuing, although from time to time we have been subjected to global shocks. I think the focus is on Make in India, the focus on production-linked incentive scheme, and now in the last budget, the government announced a national manufacturing mission in January 2025. So all these things will over time show results in terms of creating India's niche competitiveness in at least a few areas of manufacturing, which we have done now in the case of smartphones, for example. And I mentioned in my lecture in the case of air conditioners. And we have also clawed back some of the ground we lost in active pharma ingredients. And so on. And given that developed countries, including China, have vacated the space on labor-intensive manufacturing, whether it is textiles, footwear, ready-made garments, etc., we can still find a niche in those areas, and that's important for us. So there are areas where I think, given the right policy framework, which we are having, and deregulation, and predictable and stable tax policies, by the end of the decade or another 5 more years later, we will have created a certain niche areas of competitiveness in manufacturing for India.
Okay. Sir, in your speech, you often mention that the importance of learning in the right way. So, because you mentioned yourself as a financial economist, what is your suggestion, or what is your feedback, or something to give to our young students who would like to contribute to the policy making or come into this field?
Sure.
Is there any roadmap, sir?
Well, I wish there were a roadmap, but one can point to some important guidepost rather than a clear, well laid out roadmap. In fact, this is a case of, first of all, trying to understand what is your own aptitude, what is your strength, what interests you, what makes you jump up from the bed every morning with excitement. That is what you should be doing. If policy doesn't interest you, don't do that. So you could be interested in creating something new, running an enterprise, managing people, and you could be a very great salesperson, marketing. Do that. You are still contributing to the country. Those who are interested in the bigger questions are the ones who will be naturally drawn to policy. And for that, I think there will be a time and place when you will be able to contribute. So be patient. But in the meantime, keep strengthening the foundation, which means read widely, read eclectically, and don't judge initially. Your job should be to absorb. You have to give judgment only if there is no other choice, but you have to judge or take a call. Until then, just simply learn and accept and absorb all perspectives without judging. And because policy making is a wicked problem, and appreciate the nuances of what it is to make policy in a democracy which is 145 crore people. It's not easy. There is no precedence in the world for this. And India is a unique case. And therefore, it is too easy to judge, but it is too difficult to gain the other perspective. And therefore, to be a successful policymaker down the road, if not now, it is important to be able to take in all perspectives. As one of my bureaucrat friends always says, one should be prepared to hold two contradictory thoughts in your head at the same time. That is an important prereq for someone wanting to be a successful policymaker.
Nice. So thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thank you for being a part of our podcast. And we have Dr. V. Anantha Nageswaran. And thank you so much.